Can you see my screen okay now?
Yep, perfect. So welcome everyone who took the time to join our webinar today. So I think today we have another, very interesting, important topic, revenue manager of tomorrow or of the future, and we're happy to discuss this topic with you. For frequent visitors of our or participants of our webinar, see that we have some change today. We have David joining us for the first time. We'll say a few words later to introduce ourselves. So let's get started with the webinar. And before we do so just very briefly. So my name is Ingo Reinhardt. I'm your co-host of this webinar, co-founder of Buynomics. Spent, say, most of my professional life in pricing. Before founding Buynomics, worked in a price consulting company, seen many challenges on the theoretical and practical side, and we're very, very happy today that we can introduce David to you, also with a very long and impressive track record in the field, and he will help me today present this webinar on revenue management. So a warm welcome to you, David, and just a few words on yourself.
Yeah, so really great to be here. So I've got a few years in CPG, data insights and analytics. Joined Buynomics less than 3 weeks ago, and genuinely really excited to be part of this team. I think this is a fantastic company with some great capabilities, and as you can see, I have worked in this field for a while, and really happy to be here.
Very happy to have you. So let's talk about just very briefly on company background. So David already touched a little bit on that. Founded about 3 years ago. I would say our main focus industries are telecommunications and also consumer goods. And what we're offering is a software solution to make your life more the work easier, more transparency, how customers will react to changes in your offer or in your pricing. So the software overall covers all the key pricing challenges. We will touch on some of these today while explaining the role of the revenue manager, and we're very happy to demonstrate what we think about the field. So what's revenue management about? Of course, this has to be to some extent a generalization, but from our experience, there are 4 key topics in revenue management that are key and that are and I think that's the particular thing about the revenue management role, that are brought under one hat. For those who are in the field for a longer time, seen that some of these topics have been in different departments or are still in different departments at the moment. So price decisions are often taken, for example, in marketing or product marketing. Then there are portfolio or pack architecture decisions that are relevant for revenue management. Then, of course, there are the trade promotion decisions. So how much discount should you give, what products should be in a promotion, when should you have a promotion, what type of promotion should you have, and of course also the question of how to negotiate with your retailers, how much discount to give, how much bonuses or other incentives to give for certain tasks that a retailer might do to help you with your business. And these 4 challenges are being brought together under the revenue management role. And I think when you look at pricing theory on the next slide, very simplified, it is obvious that these things belong together. So a simple world, on the left side, there's just one product, apples, and you have demand for this product. You set a price for it. Depending on the price, the number of people who buy your product will change. If it's cheaper, more people will buy it. If it's more expensive, fewer people will buy it. And when you know how many people will buy your product at a certain price, you know your profitability, you can optimize your trade terms, you can decide, do I want to sell the apple 1 week for $1 and the other week 2 for $1, or whatever other measure you take. So in a typically, this is also where the textbook ends, or where, as far as this is how far a textbook actually can go. In explaining reality, and from these simplified textbook examples, concepts like price elasticities come. But if you look at the right side, a more realistic case, the real world is of course much more complicated than a world in which you only sell one product. And what we found, and this is also why we founded Buynomics, is that a proper tool is missing that's capable of managing the complexity of the real world, where you have a complex product portfolio, you have complex promotion decisions, for example, what products to have in a promotion, how much to promote, how often to promote, in what type, and so on, and how to map the trade terms to that complexity. So it might be that with one set of incentives, bonuses for the retailer, or a discount, one type of promotion works better than another. And these things are difficult to decide. And I think the revenue manager of tomorrow needs to be able to manage these complexities, the actual complexities that we have in the world. And there are, for example, with the pandemic that's now hopefully coming to an end, and other effects that might come as a result of that, increased inflation, for example. This is happening in a very complex environment, and this is the task of the revenue manager and what needs to be done. And on the next slide, I think what's also, and then I'll hand it over to David to go into the details. I think from our experience, what's also very important for revenue managers as a task of the future, what needs to be done is to manage processes properly, process around revenue management, from understanding the world, having the proper data inputs, bringing together different data inputs, from sellout data to customer studies on what products they might prefer or not prefer. Having then a solution that allows you accuracy in your predictions. So how will a promotion affect your sales? How will a new product innovation affect your sales? How will it cannibalize your other products? These things need to be anticipated and predicted with high accuracy to make proper decisions. And of course, whatever you do as a revenue manager needs to be scalable across the organization, because also these different topics, pricing, product, trade terms, promotions, are being brought together under one role. You still typically need to involve the rest of the organization, sales, marketing, and so on. And this is something that's very difficult from our experience and what we hear from our customers. So this is also one of the key challenges, and we think that also here a proper solution that is the basis for good decision making can be an advantage, and help the organization to look at the proper topics and make decisions in one centralized solution, and help the organization then to make better decisions faster. So I'll hand it over to David to go into the details of the revenue management of tomorrow.
Great, thank you, Ingo. So I'm not going to go through these in any sort of detail, but what we have on this slide just reinforces the importance of revenue management in CPG at the moment. So just across these 6 large CPGs, every single one of them, either in a recent webinar or an annual report, mentions that revenue management is massively important to how they're going to achieve their goals over the next few years. And the challenge for CPGs is that, and especially revenue managers, they're under continued pressure to make these decisions on what levers you can pull much faster than before. Now, we've obviously, as Ingo referred to, hopefully coming out the other end of the pandemic, which has caused the biggest shift in shopper behavior in a generation, maybe that we'll see in our whole lifetimes. But we then got these other things that have been happening over the last year, 6 months, some driven by the pandemic, others just about general strategies that retailers and brands will put in place. So we've got more evolving retailer pricing strategies, especially in the UK. We're seeing movements to more loyalty-based pricing. There's obviously brand match initiatives that come out. With the growth of e-commerce, the higher percentage of e-commerce there is, the less profit each retailer is making on the baskets that they sell. As we go through range rationalizations and delists, we see category resets happening across the board. rising commodity prices, and ultimately pushing manufacturers like Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark come out recently to say that they're putting their prices up. And then also we have, in most countries, we're seeing that actually we're starting to see inflation come into place, which is putting a lot of people at unease at the moment to exactly what they should be doing. And just to touch on that inflation point in a little bit more detail, we've actually got a webinar on inflation next Friday. I'll send out the link following the session today. But we've got one of the survey results from that we're taking from next week's webinar. And just want to call out here, we've got some questions that we asked for the UK, Germany, and the US about whether shoppers are expecting to spend more and in which areas compared to prior to the pandemic. So as you can see here, I'm not going to call out each individual figure, but what we're seeing is that the numbers are different based on which country you're looking at. The figures are different based on which category you're looking at. So essentially, as we come out of the pandemic, different shoppers will have their demand levels impacted by the pandemic. So they may have been unfortunate and been in a situation where they weren't able to get employment during this period and therefore cutting back. You may have people who have been able to save money from not going on holiday and therefore have some more disposable cash. Either way, you're going to have different circumstances at that shopper level that's going to have different demands and willingness to pay for each of these different categories.
Just very quickly, I forgot to mention, if you have any question on the different topics, on the inflation or any other, please write them in the chat or the question and answers, and we will come to them at the end of the webinar.
So what's holding CPGs back from actually really be able to do their job as revenue managers as well as they should be able to? Now, we've been looking at different ways of analysing price and promotions and assortment and NPD for decades in terms of analysing them and looking at things like price elasticity studies or trade promotion tools. Now, the challenge is that they normally take a lot of time to do, and we look at them in isolation. So we will do a pricing study, maybe price and promo, may do a range study, but it will be separate. And the challenge is that they're all intrinsically linked. A lot of the platforms that people use tend to be quite inflexible as well, because there is an infinite amount of scenarios that could happen that you need to try and account for. These things are quite slow, and they tend to be provided by companies that they have their own data that's available to them, and they'll have different methodologies, and it'll all be within their own data silos. And a lot of these methods that people use are quite dated now. And it's ultimately one of the reasons Buynomics was created to come around these sorts of issues. But let's just play this out in a little bit more detail. So brand plans at the end of the years, and you've set your pricing and promo and NPD strategy out in the last quarter of the year for January start date or whenever it's going to be in place. There are so many things that can happen throughout that year that ultimately your pricing strategy is now dated, and it can go out of date very quickly. A competitor could launch an NPD. A brand match initiative means that an own label variant got matched to a discounter. Your competitor launched a more aggressive multi-buy deal than they did last year that you're expecting, and therefore took the shopper out of the market for a while longer than you'd expect. You've got range rationalizations that might happen in the 2 periods or so a year. You may have a competitor that launched a new promotion. These various things that can happen throughout the year. You can have a product that gets added to the category. And one of the challenges that we hear is that CPGs aren't able to course correct throughout the year like they want to be able to. Now, I appreciate some of it's restricted by what retailers enable you to be able to do, but we strongly recommend that you can kind of lead the charge on that if it means that the benefit is also towards the retailer as well. So very quickly, for just a few minutes, I'm just going to share with you an example of how we believe that revenue management needs to look for CPGs going forward. So what you can see here is a small demo of the Buynomics platform. So what we have here is a number of my brands that I have that I want to simulate in the category. And I also have a number of competitors that I include within this analysis that we can quickly look at. Now, the key differentials between most things that are available right now and what's available through Buynomics is essentially that you can incorporate the whole revenue manager's responsibilities. So we can look at pack size and changing pack size and the implication of that. We can look at rationalizing the range, so taking products in or out. We can look at products being on promotion or not being on promotion. And if you acquire a product, you can look at the impact of a new product into that category that previously was owned by another manufacturer. And very importantly, to help with the sales teams is to understand the key revenue margin impacts, and also understanding what trade terms you can offer to retailers to help with that kind of win-win scenario. So as I say, it's going to be a very, very short demo today in terms of what I'm going to take you through. But what we can do very easily through this Buynomics tool, and this is actually using some very highly anonymized, but real data. One of the other challenges that we see with revenue management is how long it takes you to do something. So the data has been loaded up into the platform, and you saw how quickly I was able to simulate some of this data. And we can quickly start to understand what levers that I can pull that are going to generate the biggest profit or revenue return for me. So I have my list of products in the category here, both my own and competitors, and I can understand quickly what happens if I change the price for any of these products I have within our range. So let's say we're making a decent amount of margin on the 250 gram product. We're making okay margins elsewhere, but we want to see what happens if we can make even more than that. So let's just make a slight change, add in 20 cents to the smaller pack size. I can see here that I do lose out on units and revenue and profit. And I can see that there is some shoppers who will go to different brands. However, overall, it's to the benefit of my brand because shoppers who would have moved from the small pack have upgraded to the larger pack sizes. And therefore, overall, I'm seeing an increase in my revenue. I can look at absolute, or I can look at percentage as well. So I'm going to gain 2% by doing that. Now, a revenue manager could spend a lot of time tweaking buttons, moving prices, nudging them backwards and forwards. The revenue manager of tomorrow really needs to look at how we can accelerate that process. For example, if I was to click on max profit, I quickly simulated what that would look like, and it tells me what my optimum pricing should be across my whole range to get to those maximum profits here in numbers. And I've got a 9% opportunity of profit increase that I can get to. And this is as is within our platform. Just 2 more minutes on this, and then we'll move to the end and also give some time for questions as well. Make sure we wrap up within the 30 minutes. Now, one of the other things that we need to consider is what would happen if a new product was launched. And I can do that within our office screen now. I won't go into too much detail. We can add products in, and I have the ability to add in, let's say I want to launch an 800 gram product into my range. I can quickly do that and scenario plan for what would happen if I launched this extra product. And it gives you the opportunity to scenario plan all of these different things that could potentially happen. So what we have here is a number of different examples of revenue units and profit. And what would happen is the optimum profit should I launch an MPD, and if I also launch an MPD and use the pricing lever as well. So these sorts of things are incredibly important. As a revenue manager, I might get asked what would happen if I did something. I can go away and look at a particular project and commission that and come back with an answer to a particular question. But the challenge is we don't look at things holistically. So I need to understand, should I launch a new product? And also, do I need to pull the price lever, either upwards or downwards? And do I need to invest more in trade promotions? And this is those scenario plans that you can do that. One of the other gaps is that most analyses that come into account don't look at the retailer's perspective as well. So just say in this scenario here, I wanted to look at pulling the discount tool and I want to launch the new product. I want to start to understand what the benefit for the retailer would be. So I can include my competitor data within this as well. from a revenue perspective. So I can look at, will I grow the category by launching this new product? Obviously, adding a new product in the range is a difficult conversation to have with a retailer if you're not going to take one out. So you need to make the decision of, do I take the products out of my range and replace it, or have I got it as an incremental product? And that's what we can do here at Buynomics. So let me just move back to the, hopefully you can still see my screen okay.
I can't.
Let's share my screen again. Apologies. So I'll hand back to Ingo to summarize. Okay. For some reason, it doesn't want to go into presentation.
Thanks, David, and thanks for giving an overview on the revenue manager of tomorrow and the tasks and the challenges that go along with it. So yeah, just to wrap up, I think in the beginning, a few minutes ago, we raised a number of questions or we raised a number of issues that we find important in the role of the revenue manager: process excellence, accuracy in the prediction, scalability, and incidentally, what David showed satisfies all of these criteria, and this could actually be a solution to solve that issue. Yeah, let's move, I think, to the Q&A. And should we, I'll just read it to you, David, and you can answer the question. So the first question: could you share a few words on major difference for commodity supplier in a B2B environment versus example with CPG world? Yeah, I can take this one. So I think the major difference between B2B, in this case, B2B, a commodity supply in B2B and CPG, is that in B2B, when you have direct customer contact, you on the one hand, you have the opportunity to, you know your customer better. You know, for example, how much revenue that customer makes with you. You know what industry the customer is from. Maybe you have an understanding of how their decision process works and so on. So you have the opportunity to better understand the needs of that customers and tailor both your offer and your pricing to these specific needs. So that's the difference. If you're interested in, I think from our experience, if you're looking at a B2B environment where you're talking about a case where you have very small B2B customers, they tend to be very similar to the CPG, to the end consumer world. So the difference is gradual. If you have, just in principle, if you have few large customers in B2B, then you have the opportunity to make customer specific offers in pricing. If you have very smaller B2B customers, then the difference between the B2B and B2C world are not that large.
There's a question from on the chat here. So you're able to model the retailer profit, but there is a same gap that we struggle with of simulating profit contribution of competitor products. How can you overcome that? So there is some extra here. So retailers often challenged to say
I'm not sure the
so the retailers often challenged to say you're dilutive to my margin mix, so why should I launch your product or increase distribution? Yeah, so there's.
Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's a good question. It is a difficult one because obviously retailers aren't going to share margin information with you, so there is some element of assumptions that you need to take into place. The assumption you obviously could make is that you have similar trade terms of the ones that's been agreed and use that to your advantage, and then you can actually put in within our platform some assumed terms that have been agreed, and then looking at what the margin is based on their sales, and then calculating the profit that way. But looking at margin mix from it's a really difficult question to answer in terms of a competitor products. There are some assumptions that would have to be made.
But what's been offered is that you can simulate the retailer view, for example, in our solution. And I mean, often if you have an understanding of the market, you know your own margins, I think you have an understanding of also the margins your retailer makes with your competitors. And you can use that information to assess what the world looks like from the retailer's point of view, and also how you fit in there, and you can, for example, then see if that's just negotiation tactic or if there's something to that claim.
I hope that answers your question, but we'll follow up with that after the call.
Thanks.
There was one more question that came in around what sort of data do you think is best that revenue managers should make sure they have access to?
Yeah, I think from our experience, the most relevant and also the one that's most honest, I would say, from a customer point of view, are the sellout data in markets. And this is typically the workhorse of our solution as well. So we read in the sellout data, and this allows us to model how customers react to price changes, how customers react to product changes, and with that we can provide the core of the transparency that's needed for our solution. And on top of that, we can also work with all other typical pricing studies. So for example, if you run a conjoint or you run any other behavioral study that can be fed into the solution, this makes sense. For example, if you have an innovation, if you have a new feature in a product, or you change the packaging of something and you change it to something that doesn't exist in the market yet, then you can, for example, use the specific information or the results of a specific study and add them to what you already know from the existing business, and simulate how that would do in the market. And we actually have by now some really good experience with this approach of mixing different data sources to get the most out of what's available. Also, if you have markets, maybe smaller markets where you don't have proper data, you don't, for example, have sellout data, but only sell-in data, we can, or you can use what you know about the end customer from other market and make the sell-in data that you have for these smaller markets more useful for your analysis.
So I had one more question. I don't know if we have time for it, but we have had one that's come in just now. How do your platforms integrate with wider business platforms, sell out forecasting, finance, etc.? Do you want to try and answer that in 30 seconds, Ingo?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it does. You can use it across different platforms. And we have examples for that. To give a specific answer, I would need to know your environment, and then we can discuss how that fits into your specific environment. But so far, we are integrated with other platforms and solutions.
We'll follow up with that one separately after the call. So, and if you do have any other questions, please do feel free to get in touch with us. We have a webinar next week, especially dedicated to inflation. I'm just going to put the link in the chat now, but we'll also send it out. I think inflation is a really hot topic at the moment that's happening, and we have some really interesting perspectives about the impact on inflation for not just revenue management, but for brands in general, and what it means for you and what you need to be prepared for. So we have that coming next Friday, so keep an eye out for that. And Ingo will be taking through his thoughts on inflation. So thank you very much for everyone for joining. And hopefully we see you again next Friday, if not soon.
Yeah. Until then, have a great weekend, and looking forward to next week. Great. Thanks.
Good weekend, everyone. Bye.